Margaret Ellis was a name that carried weight across America. At 48 years old, she was the CEO of a sprawling business empire that stretched from luxury hotels to global real estate investments. Her face had graced the covers of Forbes and Time, her speeches echoed in boardrooms, and her signature had the power to shift markets. People called her a self-made queen, a woman who built an empire out of sheer grit, strategy, and relentless ambition. But behind the glass walls of her Manhattan skyscraper, the silence was deafening. Every night, after meetings ended and the last assistant left, Margaret would sit at her corner desk, staring out over the glittering skyline, and feel an ache she could no longer ignore. Her phone was full of unanswered messages from her younger brother, invitations missed from her sister's family dinners, and birthdays of her nieces and nephews that she hadn't attended in years. She had been present at every corporate milestone, but absent at every family moment. One evening, as she scrolled through her phone, Margaret stopped at a photo her sister had posted on social media. A backyard barbecue filled with laughter, messy plates, kids running barefoot in the grass. She zoomed in on her father, now older and frailer than she remembered, sitting in a lawn chair, smiling at the chaos. Margaret's chest tightened. She hadn't seen him in almost 2 years. That night, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat in her penthouse alone. The walls were adorned with priceless art, the shelves lined with awards, but everything felt hollow. What good is all of this? She whispered to herself. If the people I love don't even know me anymore? The thought that had been quietly gnawing at her for years finally roared to life. She had built a world that celebrated her power but starved her soul. And for the first time in decades, Margaret considered the unthinkable, walking away. Not because she was tired of success, but because she longed for something far more precious. Not deals, not wealth, but family. Her empire had made her a queen in the world's eyes, but in her heart, she felt like a stranger in her own family. And now, she wasn't sure if she could live with that emptiness any longer. The morning after that sleepless night, Margaret walked into her glass-walled office on the 52nd floor. Everything was as polished and perfect as ever. The assistants buzzing with schedules, the executives waiting with reports, the phones ringing with opportunity. But to Margaret, it all felt strangely distant, as if she were watching a movie she no longer belonged in. Her chief financial officer, Charles, was the first to notice. "You seem distracted today," he said carefully, sliding a stack of quarterly reports toward her. Margaret forced a smile, but the truth was bubbling beneath the surface. She scanned the numbers. Profits were up, expansion plans were on track, investors were thrilled. By all accounts, she was winning. Yet, a thought whispered in her mind. What about your father's smile? What about the birthday you missed last week? What about the family you're losing in exchange for all this? Later that afternoon, Margaret excused herself from a high-stakes meeting halfway through. The room fell silent. Margaret Ellis never walked out of meetings. She closed the heavy oak door behind her and leaned against the hallway wall, pressing a hand to her chest. Her heart wasn't racing from stress, it was aching from emptiness. She pulled out her phone and, almost without thinking, scrolled to her brother's number. Her thumb hovered over the call button, but she hesitated. What would she even say after years of absence? How could she explain that she was there for every corporate merger, but not when his daughter broke her arm, or when their mother had surgery? That night, Margaret sat on her balcony overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline. The city that once fueled her ambition now mocked her with its endless noise and neon. She thought about the woman she had become, admired, envied, untouchable, and the little girl she used to be, running barefoot in her father's backyard, dreaming of success, but never imagining it would cost her the people she loved. Her eyes welled up. She whispered into the night, "I don't want to lose them." The next morning, Margaret made a decision. It was small, almost invisible to those around her, but to her it was monumental. She cancelled 2 meetings, rescheduled a business dinner, and instead, she bought a train ticket. Not a private jet, not a chauffeured car, but a simple train ticket to her hometown upstate. As she sat quietly in the station that evening, dressed in jeans and a plain sweater instead of her usual tailored suit, nobody recognized her. She looked like any other woman waiting to go home, and for the first time in years, Margaret felt a strange sense of relief, because in that quiet station, she wasn't the CEO, the empire builder, the millionaire on the magazine covers. She was just Margaret Ellis, the daughter, the sister, the woman who desperately wanted to find her way back. And with that train ride, the first crack appeared in the empire she had spent her life building. The train rattled through rolling hills and farmland, a stark contrast to the steel skyline Margaret had grown used to. Each passing mile carried her farther from the world of stock exchanges and boardrooms, and closer to the place she had avoided for far too long. Her palms were sweaty, and for the first time in years, she felt nervous. Not about investors or profits, but about her family. When the train finally screeched to a stop at the small town station, Margaret stepped onto the platform with her leather duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The air smelled of pine and earth, so different from the exhaust and concrete of New York City. She stood there for a moment, staring at the familiar streets, her throat tightening. She called for a cab, but halfway there, she asked the driver to stop a block early. She wanted to walk. Her family's house looked the same as it always had. White picket fence, flower beds out front, a porch swing that creaked gently in the breeze. For years, Margaret had told herself she didn't have time to visit. Now, standing before it, she realized time had been slipping through her fingers all along. Her heart pounded as she climbed the steps. She hesitated, hand hovering over the doorbell. Would they even want to see her? Would they forgive her for the birthdays missed, the holidays skipped, the countless excuses made in the name of business? Before she could ring, the door creaked open. It was her brother, James. He froze, eyes widening as if he was seeing a ghost. "Margaret," he whispered, disbelief in his voice. Tears welled in her eyes. "Hi, James. It's been too long." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them, years of hurt and absence filling the air. Then James stepped forward and pulled her into a tight embrace. She clutched him like a lifeline, sobbing quietly into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she whispered over and over. Inside, their mother sat in her favorite chair by the window, knitting. When she looked up and saw Margaret standing there, her hands stilled. The yarn slipped to the floor as tears filled her eyes. "Oh, my baby girl," she breathed. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself up and opened her arms. Margaret rushed forward, wrapping her arms around her mother, inhaling the familiar scent of lavender and home-cooked meals. For the first time in years, she felt safe, not as a CEO, not as a millionaire, just as a daughter. Later that evening, the small living room filled with laughter and stories. Her niece Emma showed her drawings. Her nephew told her about his baseball games, and her mother fussed over her as if she was still a child. Margaret soaked it all in, every smile, every touch, every word. But beneath the joy, guilt still lingered. She couldn't erase the years she had missed. She couldn't undo the nights they had needed her, and she wasn't there. Yet, as she tucked Emma into bed that night, Margaret realized something. It wasn't too late. She couldn't change the past, but she could change the future. And for the first time in years, she vowed silently to herself, "I will not leave them behind again." The morning sun streamed through the lace curtains of her childhood home, filling the kitchen with a golden glow. Margaret sat at the old wooden table, a mug of coffee in her hands. It had been years since she'd tasted her mother's pancakes, and the smell of maple syrup and butter stirred up memories of simpler times. But as the laughter from the night before echoed faintly in her mind, the air today felt heavier. Her brother James leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying her carefully. "So," he began, his voice cautious, "how long are you staying this time?" His words carried no malice, but there was a sharp edge of doubt. He remembered too many visits that ended abruptly with a phone call, a flight back to New York, and promises never kept. Margaret's smile faltered. I don't know yet," she admitted, her fingers tightening around the mug. Their mother, sitting at the head of the table, looked at her with worried eyes. "Margaret, you've worked your whole life for that empire. People don't just walk away from something like that. Are you sure this isn't just a break, a vacation before you go back?" The words hit hard. She wanted to shout, "No, this is real. I'm done with that life." But the truth was, even she wasn't entirely sure. Years of ambition had wired her to chase the next deal, the next victory. Could she truly leave it all behind? Her niece Emma padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, holding a drawing. "Aunt Margaret, look, it's us in the park." She smiled brightly, showing the crayon picture of a stick-figure family holding hands. Margaret's heart cracked open at the innocence of it. James saw the look in her eyes but pressed on. "You've been gone a long time, sis. We want to believe you're really here for good. But can you blame us for being scared you'll disappear again?" Margaret swallowed hard. She looked around the table, the family she had lost touch with, the home that had waited for her. "I know I've failed you all before," she whispered, voice trembling, "but I'm not that woman anymore. I don't need skyscrapers or headlines. I just need this us." Silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking of the kitchen clock. Finally, her mother reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Then prove it, darling. Stay. Show us you mean it." Margaret nodded, tears stinging her eyes. She didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time, she wanted to fight not for profit, but for love. The first week back felt like a dream. Family dinners, long walks through the quiet streets, laughter echoing through the small house. But soon, reality began to press in on Margaret. She had traded skyscrapers for silence, and silence could be deafening. One afternoon, she sat on the porch swing with her laptop open, checking the news. Headlines screamed of her company's soaring profits, a merger she had set in motion before leaving, and photographs of her former colleagues toasting champagne. Her name was still in the spotlight, though she wasn't there. A part of her chest tightened. They don't need me anymore. Or maybe they still do. Her phone buzzed with an email, a board member begging her to reconsider, warning her that stepping away would cost her billions. Margaret quickly shut the laptop, guilt washing over her. This was supposed to be her fresh start, but the old life refused to let go. Meanwhile, small-town living wasn't as effortless as she remembered. Grocery shopping felt foreign without assistance handling it. She burned dinner twice, earning playful laughter from her niece, but also a sting of embarrassment. When her nephew asked her to come to his baseball game, she accidentally scheduled a quick business call the same evening. The look on his disappointed face broke her heart. At night, she lay awake, torn between two worlds. The empire she built was still calling her, whispering promises of power and legacy. But the sound of her family's laughter from down the hall reminded her of everything money couldn't buy. One evening, as she carried in firewood with James, she confessed, "It's harder than I thought. Part of me misses it. The control, the rush. But I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you again." James set the logs down and looked at her seriously. "Margaret, no one said this would be easy. You built your life around money and success for decades. But if you really want this, if you want us, then you'll have to learn to live without the spotlight. And you can. You just have to want it badly enough." Margaret nodded, her breath visible in the cool night air. Deep down, she knew James was right. Letting go wouldn't happen overnight. It would take patience, mistakes, and sacrifice. But as she stood there under the stars, she whispered to herself, "This time I won't run. I will learn." It came on a rainy Thursday, the kind of day when the sky seemed to press low against the earth. Margaret had just finished baking cookies with Emma, flour still dusted across her hands, when her phone buzzed with a number she hadn't seen in weeks. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Margaret, it's Richard," said the voice of her longtime business partner. His tone was urgent, almost pleading. "Listen, I know you've stepped back, but we're on the brink of something historic. A global expansion deal, bigger than anything we've ever done. If you return now, you won't just reclaim your position, you'll secure your legacy forever." Margaret's pulse quickened. Legacy. That word had always been her North Star. The idea of her name etched into history books as one of the greatest entrepreneurs of her generation. It was a temptation she thought she'd buried. She glanced toward the kitchen, where Emma and her brother James were laughing, rolling cookie dough into crooked shapes. The warmth of their voices mixed with Richard's polished persuasion. Two worlds collided in her chest. "Richard," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I can't." He pushed harder. "You've worked your entire life for this. Are you really going to throw it all away to sit in some small-town kitchen making cookies?" The words stung like ice. Margaret stepped into the hallway, her free hand pressed to her forehead. "Maybe you don't understand," she whispered. This is what I want now. Not power, not headlines. Just them." Richard scoffed. "You'll regret this. Opportunities like this don't wait." She hung up, her hands shaking, tears threatening to spill. For a moment, doubt clawed at her. Was she being foolish, walking away from a fortune, from everything she had built, for something as fragile as family bonds? That night, James found her sitting on the porch, staring at the rain. She told him everything. Richard's offer, her fear of regret. James listened quietly, then said, "Margaret, money can buy you buildings, planes, and newspapers, but it can't buy you Emma's smile, or Mom's hug, or this moment right here. Ask yourself, what do you want your last memory on this earth to be? Signing a contract, or sitting with the people who love you no matter what?" Margaret broke down, sobbing into her brother's shoulder. And in that moment, her decision crystallized. The empire could live on without her, but her family couldn't. For the first time in her life, she chose love over legacy. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as Margaret tied an apron around her waist. Her mother chuckled softly from her chair. "I never thought I'd see the day my daughter, the Wall Street queen, would be making pancakes from scratch." Margaret smiled, though inside she felt the weight of doubt. She knew words weren't enough anymore. Her family needed to see that she was truly committed, that this wasn't a fleeting visit before she returned to skyscrapers and meetings. She poured batter onto the skillet, listening to Emma chatter about her favorite teacher and James talk about fixing the old truck. These simple conversations felt more grounding than any boardroom debate she had ever attended. Still, she wondered, was she truly capable of this new life, or was she just playing pretend? Later that day, James invited her to help with chores around the house. At first, Margaret hesitated. She had assistants and staff for everything in her old life: plumbing, gardening, paperwork. But here, there was no one to call, no corporate card to swipe, just family, hands, and effort. She joined James outside, holding tools she barely recognized. They repaired the sagging porch steps together. At one point, she dropped a hammer on her shoe and burst into laughter, the sound so free and unguarded that even James laughed until his stomach hurt. "Well," he teased, "you're no carpenter, but I'll give you points for effort." By evening, she was exhausted in a way she had never been before, not from deadlines or deals, but from real work, sweat, dirt, and clumsy attempts to help. Yet when she saw the porch sturdy again, and Emma running across it without fear of falling, Margaret felt something she hadn't in years: usefulness in the most human way. That night she sat with her mother, folding laundry side by side. "Mom," she said quietly, "I don't know if I'll ever stop being tempted by the life I had, but I want you to know I'm here. Not just in words, in action. I want to earn my place back in this family." Her mother placed a wrinkled hand over hers and whispered, "Sweetheart, families don't need you to earn your place. You've always had it. You just needed to come home." Margaret's eyes stung with tears as she realized the truth. Her empire had measured her by accomplishments, but her family measured her by love, and for the first time she understood the difference. The sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the calm of the afternoon. Margaret was in the backyard, helping Emma plant marigolds, when a sleek black car rolled up in front of the house. It was so out of place on their quiet street that even James frowned, wiping his hands on his jeans as he stepped onto the porch. From the car emerged Richard Lawson, Margaret's former business partner, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit, polished shoes that had never touched dirt, and a look of quiet authority. He might as well have been a messenger from another world, a world Margaret had tried so desperately to leave behind. "Margaret," Richard said smoothly, as if no time had passed, "we need to talk." Emma clutched Margaret's hand, sensing the sudden shift in her aunt's mood. Margaret forced a smile for her niece, then stood, brushing dirt from her jeans. "Richard, this isn't a good time." He stepped closer, ignoring the puzzled looks from her family. "It's never a good time with you lately, but this is important. The board is in chaos. Investors are panicking. They want you back." His eyes flicked to the modest house, the worn porch, the flowers in Margaret's hands. A smirk tugged at his lips. "Is this really what you left everything for?" The words stung, though she refused to show it. James crossed his arms, standing protectively behind his sister. "She doesn't owe you anything," he said firmly. Richard's eyes narrowed, clearly unaccustomed to being challenged. "She owes everything to what she built. Margaret, you and I both know you don't belong here. This small-town playhouse, it won't last. You're bigger than this, and if you don't return soon, you'll lose it all. The empire, the legacy, the respect." Margaret felt her throat tighten. For years, those very words, empire, legacy, respect, had driven her every waking moment. But now, standing with dirt still under her fingernails and her niece's tiny hand in hers, she realized how hollow they sounded compared to laughter at dinner, warm hugs, and quiet nights with her family. She looked Richard in the eye, her voice calm but steady. "Maybe I don't belong in that world anymore. Maybe what I was chasing wasn't worth what it cost." Richard's jaw tightened, his polished confidence faltering for the first time. "You'll regret this," he said sharply, before turning back to his car. The door slammed, the engine roared, and within seconds, the black car disappeared down the road. Silence hung in the air, broken only by the chirping of crickets. Margaret exhaled, her hands trembling slightly. James placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah, for the first time in a long time, I think I am." Still, as she watched the car vanish into the distance, she knew Richard's words weren't just a threat, they were a warning. The life she had left behind wouldn't let her go without a fight. That evening, the family sat around the dinner table, the glow of the chandelier casting a warm light on their faces. But the atmosphere was different. The tension left behind by Richard's visit still lingered like a storm cloud. Margaret tried to smile, to joke with her niece and nephew, but she could feel the questions in the room pressing in from every direction. Finally, her brother James broke the silence. His voice was careful, almost hesitant. "Margaret, are you sure about all this? About leaving everything behind?" He glanced at her, then down at his plate. "Richard's right about one thing. You spent years building that empire. You can't just walk away like it means nothing." Her mother set down her fork, her wrinkled hands trembling slightly. "Sweetheart, we love having you home. But if this is just a visit, if you're only here to escape for a little while, it'll hurt even more when you go back." Margaret felt their words like daggers. She had known this moment would come, the moment when the people she loved most would question her resolve. Her chest tightened as she looked at them. Her family, the very reason she had walked away from skyscrapers and boardrooms. "I'm not running away," she said softly, her voice breaking just a little. "For years I thought success was everything, but the more I built, the lonelier I became. The more I earned, the less I felt. And every time I missed a holiday, every time I skipped a phone call, every time I put you second, I lost a piece of myself. Her mother's eyes welled with tears, but she didn't say a word. James kept his gaze steady, searching her face for the truth. Margaret leaned forward, her hands gripping the table. I don't care about the empire anymore. I care about Sunday dinners. I care about Emma's drawings and Ben's baseball games. I care about being here when Mom needs me. That's what matters. That's what I've been missing. For a long moment, no one moved. Then little Emma, sitting beside her, reached across the table and slipped her small hand into Margaret's. I'm glad you're here, Aunt Margaret, she whispered. The room softened. James's shoulders eased, though doubt still lingered in his eyes. Their mother reached out, covering Margaret's hand with her own. But deep down, Margaret knew Richard wasn't finished. He would return, and the temptations of her old life would return with him. The only question was, would her family believe in her strength enough to stand by her when that storm hit again? A week later, Margaret was in the backyard helping Emma plant flowers when a sleek black car rolled up the driveway. The sight of it sent a chill through her, because she knew exactly who it was before he even stepped out. Richard, always sharp in his tailored suit, his presence felt like a shadow of her old life creeping back in. He approached with his usual confidence, carrying a folder in his hand. Margaret, he said smoothly, I'm not here to argue. I'm here to offer you something you can't refuse. Her heart pounded. She wiped the dirt from her hands and stood tall, bracing herself. Richard opened the folder and slid a contract toward her. The board is panicking without you. We're offering you complete control, unlimited resources, and a new expansion deal worth billions. This could cement your name in history. All you have to do is come back. For a moment, Margaret felt the old temptation stir, the thrill of power, the validation, the idea of leaving a legacy greater than herself. She could almost see her old office, the glass walls, the city skyline calling her name. But then Emma tugged at her sleeve, her little hands smudged with soil. Aunt Margaret, can you help me with the roses? The innocence in her voice, the simplicity of the request, pierced through the noise of Richard's offer. Margaret bent down, picking up the small shovel. She looked Richard in the eye, her voice steady but gentle. I already have what I need, Richard. This, she gestured to the garden, the house, her family watching from the porch. This is where my legacy is. Not in boardrooms, not in billion-dollar deals. In love, in family, in being present. Richard's confident smile faltered. For the first time, he looked uncertain, almost small. You'd give all that up for this? Margaret pressed her hand over Emma's as they placed a flower into the soil. No, she said firmly, her eyes never leaving his. I'm not giving anything up. I'm gaining everything I ever lost. Silence fell. The only sound was the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Richard closed the folder slowly, his jaw tight. He gave a short nod, as if realizing he'd already lost her, and turned back to his car. Margaret exhaled deeply, her shoulders finally light. She knelt back down beside Emma, guiding her hands in the dirt. Behind them, her family gathered, their faces filled with pride and relief. In that moment, Margaret knew she had passed the final test. She had chosen not wealth, not power, but love. And as the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. For the first time, she was truly free. Moral lesson. This story reminds us that no amount of wealth, power, or success can replace the warmth of family and the peace of love. In chasing dreams of status and recognition, we often forget the people who truly matter, the ones who stand by us, not for what we have, but for who we are. Margaret's journey teaches us that true happiness doesn't come from empires or boardrooms. It comes from laughter at the dinner table, a child's hug, a mother's embrace, and the quiet moments of being present with those we love. In the end, money can buy comfort, but it can never buy belonging. Family is the real treasure.